Did you know the Ancestral Kitchen podcast has a thriving online community? Patreon members love our private group discussion forum, away from the noise of mainstream social media. In this group, conversations brim with ideas, recipes, humor, and thoughtful discussion of member questions. There's a bonus exclusive podcast where Allison and I answer member questions and talk more informally about our kitchens and our lives. This private podcast also includes after-show tidbits with guests, everything we didn't dare say on the main feed, and all the extra stuff we couldn't fit into the primary episodes. There's a monthly live chat where we get together with members, and afterwards the recording goes up in the private podcast feed for members to listen in later. Come and be a part of a group that will befriend, encourage, and support you and your kitchen endeavors. We'd love to have you join us. Find all the details at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com.
Hands down, the question Andrea and I receive the most is, how do you have enough time to cook this way? Children, work, families, friends, community commitments, earning money, doing life's admin, it all adds up. And before we realise, the time we need and want in the kitchen has just disappeared. If you have ever thought, I just don't have enough time to do this, the next 90 minutes will help you. Now, even though we'd love to, we cannot promise to double your kitchen time. What we will do is share practical, real-life strategies that we both use to prioritise the time we spend on food and pass on the many ways we, over our shared 30 years of cooking ancestrally, have learnt in order to efficiently and effectively get what we need to and want to done in our beloved kitchens.
Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen Podcast.
I'm Alison, a European town dweller living in England.
And I'm Andrea, living on a family farm in Northwest Washington State, USA.
Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, Allison. How are you today?
I'm good, Andrea. Thank you. How are you this morning for you?
I am very good. I'm very
Excellent.
good indeed.
Okay.
We both have our tea.
Yes.
I have a blanket.
Very important. Oh no, I don't have a
weather's like
blanket.
over there, but it's just cool in the morning here. So,
Okay.
I'm ready to settle in for
Excellent.
this one.
It's going to be a long one, possibly. We seem to be saying that quite a bit recently.
You know what? We just have a lot of good stuff to go over.
Exactly.
Well, before we start, though, I know you're drinking oat straw tea, which maybe you should say what that is. But what is the last thing you ate?
Yeah, okay. Well, oat straw tea is what it says on the tin, really. It's made of oat straw. So not the grainy part of the oat, but the strawy part of the oat. And it's been prized for many centuries as a nervine tonic. And you can buy the milky oat. So sometimes you can buy tinctures of what's called milky oat, milky white oat, and that's different to oat straw. Milky white oat is where the grain is not yet ready to make bread with. You take it early and you squeeze it and you get kind of the milky sort of sap out of it. And that's used as a kind of an emergency herbal medicine if you've had a shock or you're struggling with something more immediate. But oat straw is also a kind of a herbal medicine, and it's more long term. It's like one of those, sometimes people call them herbal allies, and they're herbs that you kind of get to know, and you take them all the time. You take them every day for a long period of time, and they kind of work with what's happening in your body and make some changes. And oat straw does that in a way that it's a nerve tonic, so it's really good for anxiety. It's really good for anyone who has kind of nerves that are not calm. And it's also full of nutrients, lots of minerals, magnesium, and lots of other ones that I can't remember. But it's it's not just pour on the water and then drink it like, you might make a normal tea bag. You can steep it overnight in cool water and then heat it up, or I boil mine for 25 minutes on the stove, and it's delicious. Really, really lovely. So yeah, that's what I'm drinking.
So the milky one is more potent, you're saying?
Yeah, the milky one is more, people make it into a tincture, and then you'll put it on your tongue if you've had a shock, or if you're having a kind of I suppose people might use it for panic attacks, or, going through a bad time, particularly with the nervous system. Whereas oat straw is more of a long-term actor. It won't necessarily work as effectively the first time you take it, but if you take it every day for a period of months, then it will have an effect on you. And I feel like oat straw has. I feel like it's, obviously I'm a bit biased because it's oats, but I feel like it's had an effect on my nervous system. Obviously that's impossible to tell kind of objectively, but subjectively, I think it has.
Yeah. So, this is where the journaling that we've talked about from time to time is really good, because sometimes you don't really realize until you look back and you say, wow, 10 days out of 11, I said I felt like this. And I realize now I only really feel that one time out of 11. And sometimes it's kind of hard to pick up on those patterns.
Yeah, we get used to the kind of new normal.
Right. Yeah, you kind of readjust, which is a nervous system thing.
Coping mechanism.
But that is where the journaling is helpful, because you can really tell. It's great when you go to a chiropractor or something and they have an intake form when you start that says, how do you usually feel like this? Because sometimes, like a friend of mine who realized after she was seeing her chiropractor and doing various herby things for her nervous system, she actually started eating gluten again. And she didn't make that connection until her chiropractor had her do an updated form. And she goes, wait a minute, actually a lot of these things have changed. Wow. And she realized her body was just kind of in a high state of stimulation all the time and was fighting everything. And gluten was just one of the symptoms that she was having a problem with. It was interesting.
Yeah. I think that journaling or noting is very important, and to do with food as well. That there are so many symptoms that I think can be put down to our foods, what we're eating, whether it's just generally not good food or not good for us specifically. And we might notice, as Rob and I have over the years, that when we eat a certain thing for a little while, our mood changes, or the way we are changes. I mean, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride would have a lot to say about that with her GAPS diet, but that can help with that as well, I think. So, yeah.
100%. You can't hear the cricket upstairs, can you?
You mean the game of cricket or the actual insect cricket?
We're in America. We don't play cricket.
Oh, you don't play cricket. Sorry, I forgot about that. What a shame.
We play cricket as much as you play American football.
Yeah, not much.
There is a cricket in our... We're in a little dragon's cage. It ate them all, but like one survived. And I actually like it because it's really, you're upstairs and you're drinking tea and it's just like a cricket chirping. It's kind of soothing and adorable. But I just suddenly realized, I hope you can't hear the microphone.
I can't hear it. Although maybe I lived in Italy, so I'm used to crickets like deafening you for 6 months of the year, constantly.
Really?
You're just like, well, they just stop that thing. They just go on and on and on and on. I think the cicadas actually,
Italy
not
tidbit
crickets.
I didn't know.
Yeah, they just, if you're near trees,
the sound of...
they just go on forever. And then it's weird, they go on and they're so loud, they're just like background noise. And then they all stop for about 3 seconds, all of them. And then they start again. And you wonder, how do they know to all coordinate at stopping? Is there one going, right, last one, chaps, blang? I don't know. Anyway, you asked me about my lunch.
I hope it wasn't crickets. Or is this a lead-in?
No, it wasn't. It was.
Crickets?
It is actually quite relevant to today's episode, though, or some of it is.
Oh.
Usually our lunches and our food is relevant to what we're talking about, which is a good sign. I had leftovers, bolognese, which I made yesterday, and I made 4 meals worth yesterday. So we've now got this massive cast iron wok, which enables me to make more than I can in my Lodge cast iron pan. It's like twice the capacity.
Wok?
Yeah.
Do you need a skid steer to move that? Like, how do you move a cast iron wok?
Rob had to get it out of the cupboard for me yesterday morning because there were lots of other things on top of it. It was a gift, and it's absolutely wonderful because I can cook more. Whereas in the Lodge cast iron pan, it was always, bits were falling over the edge because I put so much in it, you know.
Yep.
Anyway, so this one did 4 meals, and I had half ground beef and half beef heart. So I went to the market on Saturday, and our farmer Albert had just slaughtered some cows, and he had a heart, and I was like, oh, I'll have that. The difference in price, interestingly, between the ground beef, which is minced beef in England, that is £12 a kilo, which I know both of those a lot of listeners will struggle with because they're not English. But the beef heart is £4 a kilo. So £12 a kilo compared to £4 a kilo. So it was basically half and half, the mince. I got a crank handle mincer made of cast iron, which cost nothing on eBay. And I got the heart home, and instead of doing my usual, slow cooked heart thing, which listeners, if they've been listening for a while, know about my slow cooked beef heart, it's in our cookbook, I decided to mince it up. So I cut off the sort of hard fat bits around the edge and then chopped it into, reasonable sized pieces, put it all through the mincer, and then put the ground beef in a bowl, mixed it together with the heart, so they were together, put some salt and pepper in, and then left enough out for 4 meals, and then froze the rest of that mix in 2 bags to do another 2 meals, each of them.
Oh, I love it.
And then I left that in the fridge. Then yesterday I cooked it up in the wok with Gabriel's help, with onions and mushrooms and garlic and a massive bunch of kale, tomato paste, basil, salt and pepper. I think that's about it. And we had it yesterday for lunch. And then I left some in the fridge for today. And then the other half of the mixture I froze. And so that's ready to eat in the freezer. So I got 4 meals out of that one cooking session. And we had the leftover sort of second day of it today. And then I had it with an Emma sourdough. I have received some Emma grains from our new podcast sponsor, Grand Teton. And I've been experimenting with them, trying to see what I can do. And Emma is notoriously, as I found out, difficult to make into sourdough. And I've been experimenting and finding out that it's very different, got very different working properties to wheat or spelt or rye. And so I had my second go at an Emma sourdough yesterday, and I left it in the tin in the fridge overnight and then cooked it first thing this morning for breakfast. And then I had some slices of that with my bolognese, with lard on and salt. It was lovely.
That sounds so amazing, Alison. So
it was. How about you? What did you eat? Did you eat last night, this morning?
Have I ever eaten?
Have you ever eaten? Actually, are you okay?
I'm fine. Last night, I was so tired when we came in from working outside. I didn't even eat dinner. I took a hot shower and went to bed. But I will it's the beauty of spring. And you know what? Yeah. I think because I had so much, I'm going to credit, I guess, the protein in my breakfast and lunch that I didn't feel, sometimes you don't feel hungry because you feel sick. I just never even felt hungry. I felt kind of comfortable the whole time. I guess mine kind of fits with our episode too, because the way that I make our pizzas is I intentionally make and like an extra pan of pizza, so that typically Sunday is the day we have a leftover pizza, because if you come home from church and then there's a pizza already cooked and we can just heat up pieces, or sometimes you can eat them cold if that's your preference. But it's kind of nice to have that fast food ready. But I had made pizzas, and I was trying to think of a really fun lunch because my sister was coming over, or a couple of my sisters were coming over, and so I was trying to think what's something fun we could have for lunch. But I wasn't thinking about this until the day before, and I didn't want to go buy anything, so I was kind of just in my mind scrambling through what I had, and it ended up being really lovely. I took some of the salmon and halibut that I got from Leah out of the freezer. I know, it's already bodes well. And then I baked it when we got home from church, because this is the day I was making the lunch, was actually on Sunday. And I baked it per if you were reading the Nourishing Traditions book, then in the main courses, then she has a section called fish. And right in the front page of that, she has baked salmon and a baked, I think, like a white fish or rockfish or something.
Okay.
And so I just kind of baked them per that on the same pan. I had already made spelt pizza dough, so I rolled those out and put them on big sheet pans. And when the fish was baked, and I flaked it and kind of scattered it across the pans. And then I had a package of cooked shrimp that I sprinkled across the pizzas as well. So it was fish and shrimp for meat. And then I didn't have what you would kind of think of as like a cheese you would shred or something, but I had some cream cheese. I had kefir, and I used a scoop of an avocado mayonnaise, and I whipped all that together, and then I just chopped in all the herbs I could lay my hands on. So we had cilantro, we had basil, parsley, chives, just everything fresh that I could grab. I chopped all that in, and then I put in a scoop of Megan's ranch mix. I don't know what to call it. It's like a dry herb mix that she calls like a ranch mix. And I put in a bunch of her garlic powder, because that garlic powder is just my life right now.
That's Megan from Ori's Farm Fresh, who is a supporter of the podcast and also helps us greatly with admin.
She does. I'll put her store link in the show notes, because everybody needs some of this garlic powder. It's so amazing. Anyways, I was just thinking through my head, like, how could I get this on there? There's not enough, to like spread across the pizzas. So I sort of piped it across the pizza. Like if you've seen pictures of when people make like pastries and there's like a dessert.
Yeah.
I don't know, like sauce drizzled across the top. So I piped the cheese across like that. And then I also drained a can of diced tomatoes and sprinkled those on. And I picked a bunch of basil and kind of chiffonade chopped it and put that on. I think that was everything.
And you did all that on the raw pizza base and then put it in the oven?
Yep.
Okay.
And it didn't take long at all. And then there was some baked fish left over. I think I baked like 8 pounds or something. So there was still some left over. And then I had a bunch of salad greens from the little neighborhood farm stand. And I made ranch dressing, which I'm also kind of addicted to this right now. So it's just basically a quart jar of kefir, and I mix in a little bit of the avocado mayonnaise just to make it more fatty. And then I put in Megan's ranch dressing and a bunch of chives, and I shred in carrots as well, and then just kind of add salt or garlic powder as it needs and shake it all up. And then, so we served that with greens. So anyways, all that to say, my breakfast was, and my lunch was spelt seafood pizza with salad greens. And at breakfast time, I also poached eggs for everybody. So I had poached eggs in the side of that. And then the kefir dressing, which is like fatty and filling on its own. So, that was breakfast.
So that was yesterday, and you haven't eaten since yesterday lunch?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah.
It sounds like a really nice
this morning
day
I do have tea and milk. Wow. Our lunch took a long time to talk about.
You did. I know.
We both had fancy lunches today.
You have a lovely review to read for us, I think. Do you want to go to that
let me
next?
read this. And this is from Miriam, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so Miriam Abrams, who's a nutritional therapist, and it says, coming out of a lifetime of burnout, I had lost my love of cooking and was feeling unmotivated and fairly low. As a nutritional therapist, I was already interested in ancestral nutrition, so finding you two was such a blessing. I now just put on your podcast and feel like I'm with the most incredible friends. Your voices are soothing, your information is so well delivered and fascinating, not to mention evenly balanced between science and experience, that every episode is both riveting and relaxing. Thanks to you, I've started up making water kefir again, cooking beef heart, chicken hearts next, fermenting my oats again, making bone broth again, and generally just reacquainting myself with the joys of cooking this way. I can't thank you enough. Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you, Miriam. That's lovely.
Thank you, Miriam. Yes, I love that. I appreciate that.
We do. We love to read these, just the thought that we're actually having an impact.
Yes.
It's a big difference.
And
really does.
saying how she just puts the episode on and then kind of started doing these other things, it reminds me of the feeling I used to have when once a month back in Virginia, me and some of my mom friends would get together, and everybody was very serious about farming and eating local and all of that, and everybody would make something, basically an ancestral type dish and bring it. And I always called it food church, because I felt like, if I started getting sort of tired, like, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this, and then I'd go to food church and I'd be like, I'm all full of energy.
So, inspired.
Yeah,
that's what it's like. So thank you very much, Miriam. Do leave us a review on Apple if you are able to. They make a big difference to us and to getting us out there. And remember, we've got a newsletter now as well. So if you go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com, which is our website, you will see at the top of every page you can sign up to our newsletter. Our community is now over on the website too. If you go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/join, you will be able to see all the details, us talking about what's involved, how much it costs, how you can come and be part of our world and get all those goodies as well. We have a private podcast feed which has got many, many episodes on it that's part of it. This month, we've got an extra episode going out, which is in my head at the moment, because tomorrow I'm recording it with another Megan, this time Megan Francis, who's also a supporter of the podcast. And she's just brought out a book. She was the lady that Andrea talked to on the tea episode a few episodes back. And we will be talking about our experiences writing books, and that will go up on the private podcast feed on top of all of the other stuff that's up there. So that's, I think, our admin. Might actually be able to get to the topic of today now. Yay.
Hey.
So today's topic is finding time to be in the kitchen. And I feel like this episode has been brewing for so long, because I would say it's probably, along with money, the most kind of the most popular question that I get in my inbox. People asking me, I'm time tight. I don't have enough time. How do you do it? How do you have enough time? How can I make more time? I want to do it all and I haven't got enough time. Help. Do you experience that, Andrea, with people that you talk to your end?
Yes, definitely agree, for sure. It might even be more pressing than money.
I feel like it's a reflection of me and how I feel. I mean, because, I'm concerned about money. I'm on a very tight budget and I'm trying to do everything I can to spend as much of that on food. And then when the money that I do spend on food, spend well. But I'm also always feel like there's not enough time. I'm always trying to make my kitchen time more efficient, work out how I can be in the kitchen more. And just it feels like it's my battle just as much as it is reflected in other people's battle who email me. Mm-hmm. So this episode, I've decided to divide into 3 sections. So the first section will be using your kitchen time more effectively when you're in there. The second section will be making more kitchen time in the first place. And then the third section will be tips, tricks, reassurances and stuff that both you, Andrea, have learned and I've learned along the way. Do remember at this point, Andrea, you reminded me that we have a download on our website which goes with an episode we recorded last year called 7 Meals in One Day. And that talks about how you can take one cooking session and turn it into meals for 7 days. And that's really, really useful. And is that just available for supporters, Andrea? I can't remember. I think it is.
Yes, that is a supporter bonus. And it doesn't just talk about it. It actually has all the recipes
in it. All the recipes in it. That was it. I remember now. So in the episode, we talk about the recipes. But if you want to come and join us as a supporter, then you can download those recipes and just have them ready to print out. And
it's basically another cookbook. We just don't call it that.
Yeah, don't call it cookbook. Yeah. Okay. So before we dive in, let's go to a quick ad break.
If you've been around ancestral food for very long or listened to the podcast for just a few episodes, you know liver is a superfood, and Allison and I both love it. You're looking at a food packed with vitamins A, K, a broad spectrum of B vitamins, CoQ10, bioavailable iron, plus many essential minerals. Liver is your first stop when seeking to gain energy and restore your health. Not only is it a delicacy and staple of traditional diets, it's the first thing most animal predators go for when they're hunting. Are you looking for a good way to work liver into your daily life, but getting it on the table just isn't happening yet or as much as you'd like? Or maybe, like I went through earlier this year, you're pregnant and you're pretty sick and not much food is staying down. This is where liver capsules come in. Allison and I are both supplementing our ancestral diets with liver capsules from One Earth Health. We get all the incredible benefits of liver, even when we're on the road, or preparing non-liver meals for our family, or we just can't get a hold of a liver, and the sourcing and preparation has all been handled for us. One Earth Health produces nutritious organ capsules from 100% grass-fed, New Zealand-raised cattle. Support the pod by purchasing through our link. You'll get 15% off your first order and 5% off subsequent orders. Go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/liver or check the show notes.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is using kitchen time more effectively. And before we talk about how to do that, I want to remember that all of us have competing priorities. We are stretched in many areas, you know. Some of us have a lot of kids, some of us have family commitments, some of us have work commitments, some of us are doing a lot of things, you know, most of us are doing a lot of things. And it's not just in the kitchen we're trying to get more time. For me, I want to be in the kitchen more, but you know what? I want to be in the bath more too. I want to be in the garden more too.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I want to be with my books more too. I mean, every day I'm thinking, oh, I wish I'd had a bath today. Oh, you know, I could have been in the garden more doing this. And I've got all these pile of books that I want to read and it just goes so slowly. You know, so we all have those competing priorities. Kitchen time for me is a joy, and I think it is for a lot of people who listen to us. You know, when we get in there, we're actually giving to ourselves as well as serving those we love. So, you know, we want to do that more, which is understandable. And in addition, you know, for people who follow this ancestral way of living, we want to do as much as we possibly can do for our health and also for our creativity, for art and for our budget. You know, we have all of this knowledge that we're learning about, we've learnt about, and we want to put it into practice. You know, if there's an opportunity to be healthier, we want to do it. If there's an opportunity to be more creative, we want to do it. So there's really big push factors on us. And I want to remember that we cannot do it all. I need a T-shirt with that written on. You can't do it all. But we can, with wise choices, do enough. Okay. You're right if I dive in now to making more time when you're in the kitchen? Okay, so
let's do it.
I think the key to having more time when you're in the kitchen is to manage that time. And the way that I best do that is make the basics as efficient as possible so that I can then use extra time to create or play or learn something new to bring that into my, you know, basics routine. So the way to make the basics most efficient is to keep them simple. So I make, in my kitchen, my staple meals really simple. And then I take creative time to play or try something new when I see a window of opportunity, a window of time. And the simpler and the more routine that I can make that every day, the more time and the headspace that allows me to go and do something different or learn something new. So keeping it simple really means being prepared to eat the same thing. Like I said, I made 4 bolognese meals today, and we ate the same thing yesterday as we did today. And then I froze half of them so we wouldn't have bolognese 4 days in a row, because that's kind of, for me, that's a bit depressing. But I very, very often, I eat the same thing 2 days in a row. And I think that because the food's so good and so tasty, I enjoy it every time. And then around the edges of that food, I can make variations, so I can have a different bread. You know, I could have had Emma or rye today. I could add some extra spices or extra vegetables into the second thing that I'm heating up to change it up a bit. I could serve it in a wrap instead of having bread. I could serve it with, you know, on a jacket potato. There's ways of switching up the meals which are the same, in quotes, and making them different. Andrea, how do you kind of deal with the fact that you're eating the same thing a lot of the time?
I would just say literally the same thing as you said. For one, the food is really good, so I'm excited to eat it. You know, like when I woke up and I knew there was seafood pizza, I couldn't wait to go eat breakfast because I just can't wait to have that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I kind of freshened it by having fresh greens beside it. And then it was slightly varied because I put a poached egg next to it. And then, you know, I had the fresh dressing, so it didn't feel like a bunch of, you know, wilted old stuff. It all felt very fresh.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing, you know, like if somebody's making the meat sauce you put in our cookbook, then, you know, one day you do it with one meat, one day it's with a different meat, or, you know, you cook it, like your bolognese, like, probably I would end up cooking that one way for dinner, and then the next day I might be like, oh, I'm going to add this spice into this before I serve it again, or I'm going to put it on a different carb, like you said. So it doesn't always look the same, but we are very friendly with eating leftovers, and I intentionally cook. The modern way to say it is meal prepping, but I intentionally cook ahead some elements that I know will make my life easier later.
Exactly. So that kind of leads us into talking about batch cooking. So I wanted to give some kind of real life examples of how I do that. And the bolognese is just one of those. I mean, I almost always cook 2 meals every time I cook, at least. You know, even if I'm doing something even simpler than a bolognese, you know, if I'm boiling eggs, I will boil 8 eggs or 4 eggs instead of 2 eggs that I want to eat. So then I've got some in the fridge. Sometimes, as I did with that bolognese, I will cook 4-5 times the amount that we need to eat at that meal. And then I will freeze the rest. Now, I'm mindful of histamine. That's why a lot of it goes in the freezer rather than being left in the fridge. So I generally leave 1 meal extra out to eat. And then anything extra I will freeze. Sometimes I'll freeze them together, knowing that, you know, that's 2 portions and I'll take it out. That's 2 days' food. Sometimes I'll freeze them in separate containers. So I know I've got 1 meal. And when I make a soup, I make a huge batch of soup, and then the rest of it goes in the freezer and it's available for us. Because when you're batch cooking, you can just be so much more efficient. You know, you're using less heat, so you're spending less money in the kitchen, but you're also, when you think about just onions, for example, for my bolognese, I've got the chopping board out, I've got the knife out, and whether I chop 4 onions or 8 onions doesn't actually make that much difference. I've only got to wash the stuff up once as well. So almost always, you know, if you're not used to batch cooking, kind of try to reset the way that you think about your kitchen and just double up what you're cooking each time. Make sure you've got enough containers and freeze it. I do that with sauerkraut as well. I'm not making 1 jar of sauerkraut at a time. I'm making 4 jars of sauerkraut at a time. And then, you know, I've saved time and money doing that, and those are sitting there ready for us. I make salads in bulk. So I will wash and prepare more salad than we need. And generally, we will always have a bowl in summer. We will always have a bowl of salad in the fridge, which we pull down, usually for our evening meal, and dish some of it out. That will last maybe 4 days. And then I will make another salad, put it back in the fridge. So that salad's always there. I do the same with dressings. I very rarely make dressing just for one salad. I will make a big batch of dressing, and we will use that for 4 or 5 days, and then I'll do a different one next time. We do it for roast vegetables. So we often roast root vegetables, sweet potato, celeriac, potato for me, Gabriel doesn't eat potato, beetroots, swede, parsnips, and we will fill up the whole oven with roasted vegetables, cover them in spices, turmeric, allspice, cumin, garlic, salt, pepper. And then afterwards, the rest of them go in the fridge. And those then I'm using either perhaps in the morning in an omelette for me, or just heated up and some fried eggs put over the top of it. We will have them in the evening for supper to go with some fish, or for me, a couple of eggs with some salad. And again, just like the salad, we've usually got roasted vegetables in the fridge. Another example is my oatcakes. So I make very, very big oatcakes. They're like 8 inches across. And when I make them, I usually make 10. And it takes a while, you know. I've got that time in the kitchen, and I will sometimes put some music on or a podcast on. And I'm quite happy in there making those oatcakes. And then I put them in the oven to dry out for an hour or so they're really crispy. And then I will keep those in a Tupperware container, you know, an airtight container, and they will last us like, you know, five or so days. They're just there, and then we can use them. I'll do the same with the Staffordshire oatcakes that are in the cookbook Meals at the Ancestral Hearth. I will make 10, 15 of those in one go and freeze them. So really, I'm hardly ever doing anything in the kitchen that is just for that next meal. It's always intentionally bigger than it should be. And that just allows me to efficiently use my time. I feel without that, I'd be a bit lost. I'd be in the kitchen twice the time I am now, I think, just trying to put 3 square meals on the table once a day. Can you give us, Andrew, some examples of how you batch cook? Because I know your kitchen's a bit different to mine.
Yeah. So anybody who's listening with a big family, like bigger than my family, and you're thinking, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me. We do not forget about you. And we do have things that apply to you. So what Alison said about, Alison, everything you said there, that I want to say to somebody with like a large family, it still applies to you and me and people with more. We just have to scale how we're thinking about it. And I have the same logic that runs through my head, Alison, where I think, well, I've already got, you know, like lard all over this thing. I'm just going to make enough lard for, you know, the next couple months or something. Like everything's lardy now. It's going to take me as long to wash it as if I make just as much. So I have the same thought process because that's how I eliminate time in the kitchen, because I count washing dishes as part of the cooking time. So I just want to be washing less. So with a large family, you can't always batch the main dish as much. Sometimes, you know, even you make your biggest soup pot and it's still all gone in one dinner, which is always kind of discouraging, but also oddly invigorating. But I find that sometimes I can batch the staples that go to the big thing. So maybe it's a little easier to cook 10 pounds of beans. Yeah. That might not all be used in the same pot of, you know, we'll say tortilla soup or something. But I can put, basically I've got these like restaurant containers that I can put in the fridge and then scoop out beans the next morning. You know, have tortilla soup one night with beans in it, and then the next morning scoop out beans and heat them next to fried eggs for breakfast. Like I've done some of the work for that next meal. So don't count yourself out if you're thinking, but my biggest pot still only feeds us one meal. Also, when it comes to preparing mains, you know, sometimes I make exactly like you said. I'll make enough that I can freeze 2 dinner pans full of a certain menu or a certain meal. But I will say that if I just said, I'll make this and then I'll see what's left and I'll freeze it, that wouldn't work. I have to make it. And before I even put the dinner on the table, the frozen meals are in the freezer. Yeah. Because if people see it, they're like, ooh, there's extra of that. I'll have some of that for lunch. And, you know,
that's for tomorrow.
Yeah. So if it isn't hidden, it isn't made ahead. So that's kind of how it goes. I know in lots of homes, especially when there's lots of kids coming through, and young and growing kids and teens and stuff like that, the food just vanishes. if you're cooking for a really large family, just think with a caterer mindset. Don't think, how does one person make twice as much for two people? Just think, what would a caterer do? And you know what? A caterer would go to the restaurant supply store and get a bigger container.
Yeah.
And a caterer would, when Allison's making the griddle cakes and you're thinking, well, 10, my family would eat 12 just for dinner. Okay, so go get a griddle top for your stove. Think on a scale that suits what you're doing, and don't be constrained necessarily. Like Allison, you said you have that bigger wok. That was something I did when our third was kind of reaching eating age. I went and I bought the biggest cast iron pan I could find. I mean, it almost covers 2 burners on my stove. It's pretty big, and it takes 3 children to lift it type thing. But is exactly what you were saying. I'd have like 3 little pans bubbling and I was still slopping stuff over the edge. And I thought, you know what? Acknowledge the life you're living now and adapt to it. So things that are things that are reasonable and straightforward to make in larger batches when you're already trashing your kitchen, for one thing, is big batches of tortilla or flatbread dough. So you can make the dough and pack it and cook it, or you can even roll them out and cook them, although I don't usually do that. Or roll them out and cook them and freeze them, I mean. You can also roll them out and cook them raw, or freeze them raw. Wow, Allison, hold on. Let me get my brain back together. Okay, we're here. Canning beans is a great thing to do ahead. Batch cooking beans, cooking a big batch of rice that you could eat over the next day or two. Again, like Allison, you said, beware of histamine concerns. Canning broth, rendering and freezing batches of fat. Those are a couple things that I would say almost exclusively I make multi-batches of and pack away at a time. Allison, one of the things that I've noticed about myself is that sometimes, and maybe if I was journaling thoughts and feelings and what I did today, then I would realize that some days I just don't feel like I have the presence of mind or the mental capacity to work in the kitchen much. And then there's other days that I walk in and I'm like, what are we tearing up today? Just like, get out of my way. I'm making dishes. So on those days, I intentionally say, well, you know what? I'm in the flow. While I'm here, I'm going to chop a couple onions and throw them in the freezer. While I'm here, while this is out, or if I've got, like, my sister comes over and I'm like, you know what? While we're talking, could we go shred a bunch of carrots or something? And or I'll tell people, just come sit by the kitchen and entertain me. I'm gonna be dicing this while you talk. Or if there's a friend I haven't seen in a while, I find myself thinking, is there anything she and I could can so that we could get together? It's a good way to see somebody. So let's do a little kitchen work. The top casseroles that I make and freeze, Allison, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, because if you look in my, you can go to, like, people can go visit my Plan to Eat app, even if they're not like members of the app or whatever. It's just a website, and I have like a tag. So if you are in the app, then you can just copy my recipes. But I have a tag for my top frozen casseroles, which are just the ones that are kind of easier for me to make. 2 or 3. Well, so the one we make for dinner is already probably 2x what most people would make for a pan. And then I take that and I 2 or 4x that so that I can freeze some. But it would be Swedish meatballs and gravy on noodles or rice, spaghetti and meatballs, lasagna meat or vegetable lasagna, enchilada casseroles of a variety of types, tortillas, bean and rice fillings, meatloafs, meatballs, shepherd's pie, tuna casserole, gaps type stews and soups. I really like freezing those.
Yeah, very easy.
And for me to freeze them, I pretty much have to freeze a complete meal, because when I need a meal in a pinch, I need a meal in a pinch. Like, I will not be in the kitchen at all. And then I would say the top items I just like to have frozen would be pate. I know you do this too. And make, you gotta get a blender out. If I'm blending it, I'm making a bigger batch.
You've got to wash all the bits up afterwards, come
on. Fruit crisp topping and fillings, I freeze them separately. And then you have a quick dessert, which is what we made for one of the kids' birthdays recently. Tortillas and tortilla dough, like I said, cooked shredded or minced meat. So like my mom and I, before the baby came, we roasted a couple turkeys and then we just sat there and shredded the meat and bagged it. And then we cooked the broth and canned it. Cookies and then the dairy, kefir, whey, and butter. I like having those frozen on hand.
So hearing your list makes me realise, I've got pate in the freezer. We cooked a chicken at the weekend and then probably 2/3 of it went into the freezer.
You don't even know you're prepping, but you're prepping,
I don't know I'm doing it. And it made me also think, I do the bolognese quite a lot. I do the cast iron ground meat, which is in meals at the ancestral hearth quite a lot. And I also make curry quite a lot with chicken, with a big roast that I've saved. So those are probably my top 3 kind of repeatable dishes.
If somebody's thinking like, I don't know what to prep, if you go to a grocery store, sorry, that's the last time you'll ever hear us say this on the podcast. Go to a grocery store, Allison, hold yourself together, and like go walk into the refrigerator section or something and just look and see what they've prepped. Because grocery stores will sell things like diced fruit or diced and peeled vegetables or squash. They'll have cooked shredded meat or cubed meat. And just go look and see what they're finding. Okay, people don't have time, and they'll buy this. They'll pay twice as much for chicken if it's already cooked and shredded, So go do that, and then you can
come out and breathe properly when you get outside.
Yeah. Come out and like go stare at a candle until the fluorescent spots leave your eyes.
Yeah, the other thing you can do, if you're interested in meals, is you can, as we've already stated, go look at our cookbook Meals at the Ancestral Hearth, which if you join as a supporter, you get from the Companionship Level Up. That's got examples of a lot of the recipes that we've talked about and other things that you can batch cook. Those are recipes that we make all the time in our kitchens.
I think everything in there we've batch cooked, Alison. I'm just thinking of it. Like the biscuits, everything in there.
It's got sauerkraut in there. It's got the Staffordshire oatcakes in there. It's got your bird roasting recipe, which I use all the time. The
biscuits actually came from a Prep Ahead recipe that I had read where they were saying, make these biscuits. And I'm pretty sure I put this in the instructions. And you can literally freeze them raw. And then you can take a bag of those raw frozen biscuits right out of the freezer and put them straight into the oven and bake them. Yeah.
Okay. And do also listen to the other episode that we've talked about, 7 meals in one day, because that is just a treasure trove of baking ahead, lots and lots of ideas. Okay, what I also wanted to say is a lot of these things don't necessarily take time, but they do take planning. And it's interesting because Brianna, who's a member of our community, says that she often hears people say, oh, I just don't have the time to cook like that. It's all right for you. You've got the time. I don't have the time to do it. And she wants them to understand that a lot of ancestral food is about planning this batch cooking in advance. It doesn't take long to make sauerkraut. It doesn't take long to roast a chicken and then pull all the meat off the carcass at the end. It doesn't take long to make broth. Your intervention in those procedures is kind of minimal, but you do have to plan, You have to know, right, well, that pan's going to be used for the next 24 hours to cook broth. You have to have the bones. You have to make time to make that sauerkraut that's going to last you the next, 2 months. And it's that planning that, you need the headspace to be able to do it rather than necessarily being tied to the kitchen all day. I'm not tied to the kitchen all day. So I feel like that planning is very important. And, if you're in a situation where you want more time in the kitchen and you want to be more efficient in your time in the kitchen, find a way to get that planning into your life. Now, it might be actual meal planning. Andrea talked about her Plan to Eat app. I don't meal plan. I have a smaller family, but I really think even if I had a bigger family, I sat and talked to Rob about this. I don't think I would meal plan. It's my kind of personality doesn't work well with that. But I am kind of meal planning at times during the day in my head. I kind of watch myself and we'll have a moment where dinner's going down and we're sitting around the table playing cards and I'm kind of planning the meal a little bit. Or we'll have a time when I'll wake up and I think, right, okay, what are we doing tomorrow? And so I am kind of meal planning in the background. So some form of meal planning, whatever works for you. Try one way. If it doesn't work, try another way. There's many ways of meal planning. Having a routine can really help with planning. So I have a blog post about my kitchen routines, which I will link in the show notes, which just talks about how often I do all the different things I do to have the staples of an ancestral kitchen. Having a routine can help because it's a bit like meal planning. It takes the sort of headspace off you. You know at a certain time that you're going to be doing this, that once a week you're going to be doing this, once every 2 weeks you're going to be doing this. You can write it in your diary. So I find that having a routine helps. As Andrea said earlier, get a buddy. Find someone who wants to can with you, or who wants to make bread with you, or who wants to make sauerkraut with you. And, if you want to have some time together with a friend, like Andrea talked about, it's perfect. Think about something you can do together, which will then give you both things to take home and have in your own kitchen, or actually go and, find someone, approach one of your friends and say, look, do you want to do these things together? The other way that we put that planning into our life is that it's part of the homeschooling routine that we do with Gabriel. So every morning Gabriel does some schooling with us, but part of that schooling is he goes into the kitchen and he does what's necessary for that day to move our food forward. So that might just be chopping some mushrooms, or helping with the washing up, or mixing a bread. Just something that is part of his life and our life. And we do that because we want him to understand that a real life is one where you are preparing your food every day, but also we want him to get better at the skills and techniques, and we want him to contribute to the house. So I feel like, making it part of his life at an early age has been a very important step for us, practically and, philosophically. Can you talk about planning, Andrea, and how you do at your end?
Yeah, like you said, the Plan to Eat app has helped me. I don't think it's something everybody needs to do. Like you said, a friend was looking at some things I had written down. She goes, you and I are not the same. I don't write these things down.
Yeah.
And there's just different, different things work for different people. And there is a time in my life when I think writing it down would have sent me into a panic. And it wouldn't have worked for me. But right now I'm in a stage where I'm finding everything I can take outside of my brain and put it down somewhere else is relieving pressure somehow. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's an executive functioning issue or just trying to carry too many systems and thoughts all at once. But it could be something very simple. Lexi, if you're on the private podcast, there's an episode way back in the beginning where my friend Lexi and then Allison, you and we talked about the way we plan our meals. And I wasn't doing any planning at all. And at that time, that was causing me basically great strain because I was ending up close to mealtime, was still unsure what we were going to eat exactly because of my brain was being so full of other things at the time. And so I just found that I needed a system. And then we do have an episode where Rebecca Zip and I got together and talked about meal planning as well. And that was where she was kind of teaching me about this Plan to Eat app for the first time. That has been very helpful for me and the stage that I'm in right now. But what Lexi does is the night before, she jots down on a note card what she's going to make for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. At that time, she could take something out of the freezer if she needs to. But then at least once she starts her day, she's not having to think, what was I going to do for dinner again? And she calls it a brain dump, too, where she just sits and writes down kind of everything that she needs to get off of her mind for the day.
Yeah. I think that's something that I do quite often in the evening. Yeah. I'll sit and I'll write what's happening tomorrow. We have 2 whiteboards in the kitchen, which I will often use to remind myself that something needs getting out the freezer the night before, or to often to leave instructions for Rob and Gable so they know exactly what they need to do for lunch the next day. So although I don't plan, I do use that kind of technique that Lexi uses of kind of in those moments using note taking to dump what's in my brain.
Yeah, and I'll actually say that worked really well for me up until a certain point. I don't know if it's size of family or the other competing tasks that started pressing in on me. And then another aspect was I know you and Rob do this too. I needed to be able to pass off a certain quantity of what I was doing. So a list could say something like, you just, Rob or Jacob, dice 2 onions, please. Because then I know when I'm not going to get in here until 4:30, and if the onion's already diced, I'm throwing it right into the pan and getting going, and I know I can get the meal done in time. So one thing that I use the Plan to Eat app to help me in that regard is, as I make meals over and over out of there, or dishes, I should say, you can have tasks in it that pop up on your little calendar the day before that say something like, put 5 beans into soak for the soup tomorrow. So then the next day I don't get up and go, oh, I didn't soak beans. I guess we're not having soup today.
Yeah.
So those are handy because I can also say to Jacob, go look and see what's on the tasks, and he can see it. And I've started building into our homeschool day, a portion of time where we just do the tasks that would be for the day ahead. So with ancestral food, it's kind of like Brianna was saying, it doesn't really take that long, but you do have to start it early. Yeah. Which anybody who's tried to make something out of nourishing traditions to eat right now has figured out. So if you can't plan far ahead, just plan the day before. Just that alone, I feel like that brings the cost of meals down 50%. Because if you plan the day before, you can use dried beans you soaked, or you can get an obscure piece of meat out of the freezer. If you are trying to make it the day of, you might not be able to get your meat thawed in time. You might end up having to use canned beans from the store. You just get more desperate the closer you get. And if you don't know what to do, thaw any piece of meat. Make any type of dough to ferment overnight, or soak any bean. It'll work. Then the next day you can see what you'll do with that. I've done that before. I just got to the freezer and I'm like, I'll take the first 3 pieces of meat that my hand touches and we'll see what it turns out to be. And any carb I can build a meal around. So it's handy to have a quick flatbread recipe that you like. I wonder, Allison, as you were saying, I wonder if emmer would work well for a good flatbread. I feel like that's a traditional
we had flatbreads
kind of
yesterday.
Right?
We had flatbreads with the bolognese yesterday. Gabriel and I did with it. It's really interesting because it's a bit like, it reminded me of soaking chia seeds in water. It goes kind of gloopy like jelly. It did that. Gabriel was like, what's happening to this batter? It's all funny. But it worked and it tasted really nice. So, yes.
Well, that gel must be almost like a gliadin type,
it makes
version
it stick
of
together.
Holding your dough together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I would also just throw in, Allison, I know we talked about this before in an episode all about saving money. What was that episode called? Like nourishing traditions or ancestral food cheaper than the supermarket or something.
Yeah, it's this year. It's up there, definitely.
Yeah. So bulk buying so that you aren't always shopping for staples and you just always have staples, so that periodically the things we buy more frequent are veg and dairy things that, it's like how much milk do you want to buy ahead, really? But that way you aren't just constantly having to go buy a cup of beans or grains. I don't know why I'm focusing on beans so much. I feel like everybody's going to think we eat beans 7 times a week, but I don't know why they're popping up so much in my conversation today. And then routinize everything you can.
Yeah, same.
If you can routinely make dough on a Sunday afternoon, or if you can routinely Wednesday morning bake a pan of muffins. I'm just saying things that I do.
Yeah.
If you can routinely make a big batch of pizza dough on Friday night so that on Saturday you have pizza ready to go, easy fast dinner if you're working outside, and then Sunday you have leftover pizza to eat after church, and then on Monday you already have a pre-made raw pizza dough you can roll out for a quick school lunch. You just look like the coolest mom ever.
Yeah, exactly. Pizza, yay! it's interesting to hear, kind of when you buy things, and it's made me think about, when we buy things, because we buy grains in really big bulk in advance. We've got a cupboard with all the grains in. So we're only buying those once every 3 months maybe. But I buy meat and veg once a week. We go to the market every Saturday, and that's where we get 95% of our meat and veg. And so the way that I work around that is that I see what's left in the freezer before I go, and then I go there and I buy what is there and feels right and looks right and is a good price. And then I know what I've got for that week. And I, maybe on the way back from the market, I'm kind of thinking, I could use that for that and that for that. Or maybe I've got an idea in advance. Sometimes I have an idea in advance. When I went this last Saturday, I didn't. And that heart was there. And I thought, I'll have that. And then on the way back, I'd already worked out that when I got home, I was going to mince it and mix it with the beef and make a bolognese with it, and then have some left in the freezer and some raw left in the freezer as well. So sometimes I have that idea in advance, sometimes I don't. With bread and starters, those are just routine now in my kitchen. If you have a starter and it's taking up too much of your time, you don't have to have it take up your time. Don't leave it on the counter. Put it in the fridge. Keep it low hydration, other way around. So it's really thick and pasty, and it can stay in the fridge. And I leave my starter in the fridge for a whole week, and then I bake with it just from the fridge. And my breads are lovely. You don't need to pay attention to your starter. The same, with fermenting. Like I said earlier, I space those fermentation processes out. So I'm making like every 2 months, 3 months, and then those ferments are lasting us that time. So it's kind of similar, a bit different to you. It's nice to hear that, our two different sized families and our two different ways of looking at it, but there's a thread that runs through it that is just
very much
the same.
So.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably the same for you, Alison. And I think this is one reason why I always struggled with grocery store shopping, because this is how my mind has always worked, is I don't necessarily so much go looking for food with an idea of, I need to find this specific thing to make this specific thing. I more so go with the mindset of, let me see what there is. And then based on that, then I'll make something.
Decide what to do.
And I don't know if that might be partly influenced, because I think I told you before that when I started cooking for our family, I was just, like 12 or 13, and there was 6 kids at that time, I think. And then we got up to 8 kids, and I never did the grocery shopping. I just used whatever was in the house. So I was already just being like, okay, what is there? And
you're a
see what I
master
can
of
make.
that.
So I think that's just how my mind works. But it works well with ancestral food.
Definitely.
Because you do tend to want to just show up, see what's seasonal, walk out to the garden, see what's happening.
Yeah.
And then be like, I guess we're doing squash tonight.
Yeah.
What can I do with squash?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one more thing I want to say before we go to a break, which is do work out what is essential and what is nice or what can wait. So those two things up against each other, because we've all got things we want to do and that we could do in the future, but we also all have things that are essential. And there's a big difference between those things. And so often I've been in the kitchen doing things that are nice and that could have waited. And then I'm getting panic over the essential
and then you
things.
have no bread.
It's not done. Exactly.
You have no bread because you cut your radishes into roses or something.
I think, our culture kind of encourages us to have a big list and want to tick off everything. And I know until I listened to Rob for most of the time before I met Rob, I was like, well, why do one thing when you can do 7? Like literally, I would have the space available and I would have in my head a list of all these things. I'd be like, I can do these 7 things this morning. But actually I couldn't. I just couldn't. And I just end up getting in a state and not doing any of them properly and getting burned out. So Rob has helped me to understand that, out of those 7 things, what's essential and what is nice and what can wait. Put off those things that are nice and that can wait. And don't think that you'll never get to them, because, if they're important, then you will get to them. What's more important than that long list of things that are nice is that you have headspace to do what you need to do for yourself and your family. That's important. So just always weigh up, or is this something that I kind of want to do because it's nice, or is this something I need to do? Okay. Is that good, Andrew? Do you want to add anything to that before we move on?
I'll just throw on top of that pile of what you just said that in the world of ancestral food, this is where saint days or feast days came in. So everybody knows in America on Thanksgiving, you kind of work a little harder than usual and you make some special foods for this, special feast, and you're more tired than usual, but you're okay with it because it was just once a year. And so my sister and I have started getting together one Sunday a month, and making kind of a special lunch with our families.
That's nice.
And so every once in a while we see, this would be really fun to make. And we just say, well, we'll put it on one of those Sundays because, this isn't something we normally have time to, but we'll make time for it on that special time. So having a time where you have reserved for that food that takes a little bit more effort and is a little bit more laborious, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with that, definitely. Okay, we're going to talk about how to make more time to get into the kitchen next. Let's go to an ad break first.
Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye.
Okay, let's talk about making more time to actually get into the kitchen. And there's several things I want to start this out with, which is we've often talked about this in terms of budget. And I feel like time in the kitchen is about priorities very often, just like having enough money for food can often be about priorities. It's about, well, how important is it that you're in the kitchen? How important is it that you're providing this for your family? And how are you prioritizing and valuing that? We often, when we talk about budget, say, that if you go back 60 or 70 years, you will find that people spent far more of their budget on food than they do now, like double or triple of their budget. And I feel like it's the same with kitchen time. Food does take time to cook. And for our ancestors, it ruled their lives. And preparing food should take up time, just like we should be spending more of our budget on it than as a society we are at the moment. And you think back to, when the Industrial Revolution happened in the UK, workers went from being at home to being in textile mills, and they became the operators that generated that Industrial Revolution. And that's when the foods like white bread, jam and tea became their diet, because they no longer had time to be in the kitchen. For us now, it's really hard when we're interfacing with a normal 9-to-5 life, if that's how you or your partner or your family are earning their living. Because doing a 9-to-5, you come home and you're tired and you're fed up with your boss, you've you've had a bad day, you want to rest and you want to zone out. And I understand that. I know, because I spent a lot of my life working a 9 to 5. The point I feel is that as a society and as communities, we are not supposed to be living that way, we are supposed to be working together in home domestic economies and spending our time and our resources on creating really health-giving food, rather than going and being part of a kind of a cog to keep our world that exists now going. I think it's easy, if you are still doing the 9 to 5 and you might want to get out of it, or maybe it's serving your family. It's easy to look at Andrea and I and say, well, you're at home. But we've both spent many, many years working on making being at home our lifestyle. I walked away from a big monthly paycheck and many perks to try and find a different way, because I didn't want to live that way. And, along with Rob, 20 years later, we're still trying to find that way. And I have him now, thankfully, but I don't feel like we found that way at all. I still feel like we're battling with certain things, time and budget being a huge part of that, by being out of that equation. But it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that we pointed ourselves towards and said, this is important to both of us. And we're still moving to a position where we feel like we can give the kitchen and the and farming and food the attention that we want to. I was kind of a bit garbled, Andrea. Do you want to say anything about it?
Well, I think it was great. Our food always gets us existential, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah.
The thought that I had when we were first discussing this episode and you were talking about this idea, and when Leah was here in January, she shared with me this talk by Cindy Rollins that we listened to together, and it was really, really good. Cindy Rollins was saying that the difference between the work of the freeborn person and the work of the slave is the ideas. We're thinking in like ancient Roman days, the slave on the farm was farming, but a farmer, even if he's working dawn to dusk, it's his farm and his ideas, right? And the liberal education word comes from the Latin liberalis, which is an adjective that means, relating to a free person.
Freedom. Yeah.
And free people have time, or they, can choose to make time to, learn to read, or read something, or, go listen to a Greek play, or whatever people did in the ancient days, And I think about that idea often, like I said, yesterday we came in late and I was so tired. I couldn't even eat dinner. I just took a shower and went to bed, but I was happy, right? Because I was happy with the idea of what I was doing. And I think about that in the kitchen, I'm doing it's like a liberal education in the kitchen, it's something that I choose to do because I am free to make the choice that I wish to choose. I choose to soak my beans and I choose to cook them. And that's my choice. And it is a form of freedom, and I'm doing it out of a love and an interest and the strength of the ideas. And I'm saying I believe that it is better to cook my own oat cakes than to eat a box of crackers. I believe that idea is in my mind, and so I choose to spend this time. I'm a free person choosing this work, and it does hit differently when you think about it.
I feel like, even if you only have a few moments to do that in your day or your week, when you choose to do that with that mentality, it changes your situation. I feel like at the very beginning of this journey, before I even met Rob, there were times when I could have just, given up and sat on the sofa, and it was hard, but I chose in those moments to do the thing that I felt was the right thing to do, and was the joyful thing to do, and was the creative thing to do. And the more that the more that I've actually pushed in those moments to take them and do something real and alive with them, the more that kind of sets my direction, that more of that will come to me. It's a slow process. And, if people listening don't have enough time to be in the kitchen, literally, and are trying to change that, I would say that patience is so hard. For me, it feels like it's been 15 years and I'm still fighting for enough time to be in the kitchen, and still trying to change it up so I can spend more of my budget on food and give it to the farmers that I know are making a difference in the world. But I do what I can when I can. I take that time in the kitchen when I can. I spend my money in the right way, where and when I can. And that creates change. When I was still working, then there are holidays and there are times that I could spend learning and building. And I know that a lot of people who are supporting the podcast are still, are saying, I want to have land and I want to have a place where where I can just be there all day and homeschool my kids. But they're not there yet. But they're spending their precious free time learning stuff and coming and being part of the community and building up those skills. We've talked about this before, so that slowly as things start to move, they're in a position to be able to capitalise on it as much as they can.
Yep.
So, yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
I do want to talk about time use, and I looked up some stats which are pretty scary for the average American. Now, our listeners are very much not the average American, but I'm just going to tell you the stats anyway. The average American spends 2.6 hours of their time per day watching television. They spend 4 hours, 37 minutes on their telephone. And then they spend 67 minutes a day inside the room that's called the kitchen. So that time includes cleaning up in the kitchen, making tea in the kitchen and emptying bins in the kitchen. I think sometimes cleaning up, making drinks and emptying bins takes me more than 67 minutes a day, let alone the cooking. That's what it feels like.
That's true.
So I know that most people listening here will not have those figures as part of their life, but I think it's really very useful to do an audit on your time, a bit like we were talking about, journaling changes. When you consciously look at what you're spending your time on, then sometimes that can shock you. I feel like the phone is the obvious one there, which kind of upsets me. That 4 hours, 37 minutes a day on your telephone. And it's easy to just have a kitchen timer and figure out how long you're spending on your phone, use an app that can track it. Obviously, I'm going to say, forget the apps, just get rid of the phone. We did an episode long way back called number 12, called Why I Gave Away My iPhone, which sort of starts talking about why aged, I think Gable was now 11, he was aged 1.5, I gave away my iPhone. It might seem like an extreme option, but the world completely changes when you do not have an iPhone. Everything changes. And a lot of people say to me, oh, but I need my phone. I can't get rid of it. I need it for work. Well, maybe you do need it for calls and texts. You can get other phones that also call and text that don't have all the whiz bells and everything. Even if you do need the iPhone, you do not need all of the apps that come on it. You do not need to know breaking news. You do not need to know all the stuff the world tells you that you need to know. You do not need to know it.
Breaking news, this just in, you don't need to know.
Yeah, you don't need to know all that stuff. Seriously, you just don't need to know. Your life will be better if you don't know it. It's an interesting story here because, maybe 4 years ago, we recorded that while I gave away my iPhone. And for those 4 years, most of the time I had a Nokia 3310, which was the original Nokia 3310 with the really old, slow screen. I can't remember what year it was, like maybe, I don't know, 1997 model or something. And then about 6 months ago, my Nokia just stopped working. And we tried to replace it with another phone, and that phone couldn't text very well. It had that old predictive text, and the texts weren't sending. They were only sending to certain phones, not other phones. It took me a while to work that out. So in the end, I was just like, I can't use this other phone, and I can't use the Nokia anymore. What am I going to do? And then I needed to have the phone to be able to call Rob because I was going out for the day. And in the bottom of one of my drawers was an old iPhone that my dad gave me about 6 or 7 years ago, I think, which I'd been keeping to use the camera because there's a good camera on it. And I thought, well, look, I've got this old iPhone. It's the same iPhone that I got rid of in whatever year I got rid of it, in 2015, I think. And I remember I bought that iPhone before I had Gable, so probably it's a 2013 model. And I just thought, look, I've got this iPhone. I can just use it for now. So I put my SIM card in the iPhone. So now I actually do have a 13-year-old iPhone, which has got my dad's details on it. So I can't download anything, even if I wanted to, which I don't, because I don't know what his password is for the iStore or whatever it's called. And all I do on it is send text messages occasionally and phone people. So if Rob wants to phone me, he rings me on it. If I want to phone him, basically. And if I'm going to meet someone somewhere, I'll take it with me and I can phone them. But because I've been away from an iPhone for like a decade, I don't care about those apps at all. I wouldn't even want the apps on there if I could get the apps. It's just a device for me to receive and send texts and do calls. And I think, whatever relationship you have with your iPhone, I've yet to meet many people who say they have a positive relationship with their phone. Most people would say
I know any.
They have a negative relationship with their phone. And when I hear that sort of thing in my life, I just go, well, if I've got a negative relationship with it, I've got to sort this out. That's not good. So if you're not brave enough to get rid of it or you can't get rid of it, try getting rid of all the apps. Try turning it off and leaving it in a drawer. Try living without it for a few days. Do a time audit and get yourself to realise how much you're using it, because that time not only takes away your time, but it takes away your headspace. And we've talked so much about how you need headspace in order to be able to be creative, but also in order to be able to plan for your meals 3 times a day, 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. So, I think long-term listeners know how I feel about phones.
Well, they
Andrew,
do now.
have you done a time audit ever to kind of figure out how much time you're spending on different things? Has that helped you, or have you not done one?
Yeah, I was gonna say after I had seen your notes where you were making notes on the time audits, then I was thinking to myself that timing myself doing things is one of my favorite pastimes. And I would say the top 5 things to time yourself doing are making your bed. And for those, my friends with ADHD, time yourself, and anybody with trouble or difficulty with transitions, time yourself getting dressed. I know it sounds really weird. Cleaning the table, unloading the dishwasher and loading the dishwasher, or just doing the dishes. The reason I say that is because those are things that we can inflate in our minds and be like, I don't have time to do this, that, or the other thing. But if you can time yourself doing it, and then okay, I actually reasonably can do this the first time I timed myself doing the dishwasher, I was like, all right, I don't know, 15 minutes or something. I timed myself. It was 4.5 minutes. I was like, okay, I have time for this. I
can't complain about this no more.
Yeah. And then it made me realize, if kind of like everybody's ready to go and one more person is finishing something and I'm standing here, well, I can unload it in the 4 minutes that I have standing here. You could also chip away at those 4 hours and 37 minutes that you're trying to get on your phone and just spend those 4 minutes texting really quick.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the 4 hours and 37 minutes, I get that people aren't sitting for a 4.5 hour block and doing
Absolutely.
it. But what I'm trying to say is those little 2 and 3 minute gaps are where I run and just really quickly do something. If you're waiting out, somebody's in the bathroom and you're waiting for the bathroom, well, go make your bed then. Okay. You have 2 minutes, you've got time. And those are just things that I think of to try and add time to my day where it doesn't exist, because I know, like you said, we do compare money and time, but actually they're not the same. You can always make more money. You don't get more time.
Yeah.
You only get as much time as you have. And we don't actually even know how much that is. So let's be wise with what we have. And when you said 67 minutes a day in the kitchen, Allison, I started thinking, okay, I could work with that. I could give you an ancestral menu that you could do and clean up in under 67 minutes a day.
That's got to be another episode.
It's not going to be real fancy. It ain't going to be your Pinterest menu, but it actually would be delicious and simple, and you'd even be making your own dairy. So I think we could work with that.
Wow, 67 minutes in the kitchen. That's going to be I'll hold you to that. That'll be another episode.
And if somebody's, and I know that, Allison, because I time myself doing everything. I time myself making tortillas because I'm like, I want to know how long this takes. If I say to Camille, can you hold the baby? I'm going to go make tortillas. I can tell her, I'll be gone. And I'll tell her, like, I'll be gone for 22 minutes.
Gosh.
I'll tell her, like, I know how long it will be.
Wow.
It's because I'm highly distractible. And I will go into the kitchen and I'll, like, the other day we were having that conversation. Brittany and Leah and a couple of us were talking about how long does it take to make a smoothie? And I was like, I think it takes me half an hour to make a smoothie. And that's half those 67 minutes. And then I made a smoothie and I was like, oh yeah, it's because I'm straining the kefir. I'm washing the jar. I'm refilling. Like I'm adding a whole bunch of stuff into it.
Tasks.
So I wasn't actually just making a smoothie. But then I'm like, well, I'm at the sink. I guess I'll wash the rest of the dishes. And
absolutely.
So I can get easily distracted. So I sometimes just have to time myself to keep on focus.
Wow.
But when you talked about the phone, Allison, and I know that a lot of people listen to us when they're in the kitchen.
Yeah.
But if you need to not listen to us, that's okay. Like if that helps you, like don't listen to us. Because if you need your phone just away from your body, which sometimes I think you just need it away from you to be able to think clearly, that is completely important. Yeah. And this idea has been knocking around in my head in the week leading up to this episode. So, Allison, I've spent a fair amount of time in the birthing world. So reading about birth, attending births, having my own births. And there is this concept that, and they call it a natural birth. So people will say, oh, a natural birth is one without drugs. And then there's these people who say, well, you can't really have a natural birth in the hospital because you still get disturbed by they're going to come in and ask you a question in the middle of your meditation, or they're going to try to put a monitor on you, so, that this is just the concept. Some people say I don't really care if you, I don't have a dog in this fight, but, they call it now, instead of saying natural birth, to try to distinguish between a birth without medication and a birth maybe in a more natural environment. There's this term called the undisturbed birth. And they say, oh, a lot of doctors have never seen an undisturbed birth where nobody's interrupted mom and said, hey, have you ever thought about doing jumping jacks? And they say, oh, these doctors just don't know what a woman's timeline could really look like because they've only ever seen a birth where, oh, if she hasn't progressed by this hour, then you do this. Or, and then a lot of women have themselves, this is what they say, never been able to experience that. They don't know how they would respond because they've never birthed in the absence of those interruptions. So where this thought was taking me was, I thought, oh, how many of us have ever had an undisturbed day? What do you look like in an undisturbed day? And at first I was thinking, a day with not full of interruptions, leaving and going to appointments and things like that, those days that just flow where everything goes at home. But then I started thinking, well, really an undisturbed day would be a day without the phone.
Yeah.
Where you didn't have these little hiccups constantly abbreviating your breath and shifting your brain pattern for just a moment. So we could say the natural day is the day where you don't have to leave the house and go do a bunch of appointments and all your work is centered around your family at home. But then we could say the undisturbed day was the day where you also didn't have to keep getting online, or your mind wasn't in an online space thinking about what is that email going to say, or should I respond to this person? And I just wondered what we even look like in the absence of those things.
Those days when they happen at my end are just incredible. They're
perfect.
I don't have the binging going off because I don't have any notifications on things. But I do have the computer, and I do think about that. Running an online business from home.
Yeah,
I do think about that a lot. And the days when I put the computer away and say I'm not going to touch it at all is just it's absolutely amazing, and it engenders a different headspace. Just like not having an iPhone engenders a different headspace. Not having any disturbations engenders a different headspace
disturbatives.
And that's a headspace from which we can be different people. We can create things that we never can create when we're disturbed. We can do things in a more efficient, and our brain kind of makes connections, electrical connections, in a different way. And it's a state that I would aim for as often as possible in my own life. That would be wonderful.
I agree. And if somebody's hearing me talk about the Plan to Eat app, and they're thinking, but you just talked about an app, then I will also say, for those that can't and don't choose to be on the phone, then what Rebecca, the one who taught me about it, she doesn't actually use it on her phone at all. She just uses it on their website. So it's like a calendar basically, and she can plan things out. She chooses.
Yeah.
So and you can house all your recipes in it. So all the recipes you find online on websites or like Allison's blog and things like that, you can plug them into your app so that then you don't kind of have to go dig through a bunch of bookmarks to find
them all. Yeah.
And then you can also, from the app, what she does is she plans out all her meals for the month, and then you can actually print out the recipes off of it, and it prints them quite cleanly, where if you try to print off a blog, sometimes there's ads and things that print off, but it prints them off for you, and then she just keeps those collected together, so she kind of knows where she's going with each thing. And then she has them kind of customized to her family. Some of her kids don't eat egg whites, or they don't eat any gluten and things like that, so she's adapted things to suit their diet.
There are ways of getting around things, even if they're delivered to you in an IT-based package. I mean, I know that because of me having a different way of working 100%. With computers, with an e-ink screen. And there are ways of getting around it. Okay, let's carry on with finding more time to be in the kitchen. I wanted to also talk about making it part of your life. So the kitchen and the philosophy that we have in our home around food, it is part of our life. We go to that market every Saturday, and it's a walk. All three of us go every single Saturday. It's our time to be together. It's our time where we get up and we know we're going to the market that day, and we go into town. It's our community, the people that we're getting to know there, having been in Stroud for like nearly a year. It feels like meeting friends, every week. It's part of our lives. And as I talked about before, chopping and food prep is part of Gabriel's homeschooling. That's part of our life. Time for me in the kitchen happens with music or with podcasts. That's part of my life. I'm listening to something and I'm in the kitchen. Or it's part of my creativity. Part of developing the recipes for my oat book. It's me making that kitchen time creativity. So it extends into all these different parts of our life. And when it becomes part of your life, it's more routine. It's just who you are. It's what you do. It's not something you have to kind of make special time for. Right. Is that the same? I mean, I know that's the same for you, Andrew, but is there something specific you want to talk about around that?
No, I would just agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Make it part of your life.
Yeah. Okay. And, then when it's part of your life, it's who you are. And then you're getting to know people, and you get to the situation where you might be able to say, oh, want to come over and do some canning, or do you want to come over and make some bread? You end up involving your friends, your family, everyone around you. And as we've talked about through this episode, when you join together, you can get so much more done.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we've got one more section to go. Let's go to an ad break first. Do you love oats? Want to try your hand at a traditional Scottish oat fermentation? Suhan's is just that. It was made in Scotland for centuries and will give you both a creamy, easy to digest porridge and a tangy probiotic drink. My video course, Suhan's the Scottish Oat Ferment, over at the Fermentation School, will guide you through everything you need to know to create these two ancestral foods in your own kitchen, no matter what equipment you have. Head to ancestralkitchen.com/Suhan's, ancestralkitchen.com/Suhan's, SOWANS, or click the link in the show notes to get a 10% discount automatically applied. Okay, so this last kind of section for finding enough time to be in the kitchen are just some things that we haven't quite touched on and some tips and advice that we've got. So the first thing I wanted to start with was don't feel guilty for outsourcing some of the stuff that you're eating. You cannot do it all. And as an individual, you were never meant to do it all. You know, our ancestors worked in community. They did things together. They had families, extended families, bigger situations. They lived together, they worked together, they harvested together, they cooked together, they ate together. And we are, you know, in this society, we are these little individual families in our four walls, and we were never meant to be able to do it all that way. So if you need to outsource some of it by, you know, going and finding some dairy somewhere else, someone else making your cheese, if you need to be able to go and get sourdough bread from someone else, then don't feel guilty about that. Choose what you can do in the kitchen and what you enjoy in the kitchen and what your current situation allows you to do, and let go of the rest. Mm-hmm. Andrea, you have something you want to say here, I think.
Yeah, well, I'd agree with that completely. Mm-hmm. And that's very ancestral. You know, there was a cheesemonger, there was a butcher, there was a baker, there's people who did the different specialized tasks. I know the reason a lot of us do it ourselves is because sometimes it's really hard to find good options for these things, but do the best you can. And, you know, we all do the best we can within what we have access to.
Yeah. You made some notes about the phone. Do you think you've talked about that already before, or do you want to mention that again here?
No, I think we pretty much covered it, and I'll just kind of say in the sense of where you're addressing this final kind of point that a friend of mine who used to smoke a lot of weed, I remember her describing to me when she stopped smoking a lot, and she doesn't really have a problem with people smoking it. She just felt like it was impeding her creativity. And she said when she stopped, she felt like she could think more coherently and she could have like ideas and put things together in her mind better. And I told her, I feel like that when I get away from the phone. And it just made me look at my phone differently, like what in the world is it doing to my mind that it has the effect of like a drug that made me feel like I couldn't get clear, quiet thoughts. So kind of like you were saying, Alison, if you just feel like you're having a hard time, just try getting rid of it for a while. It seems like those little moments shouldn't cause as much disruption as they do, but they definitely do something to our brain patterns. So.
Yeah, good. I was talking to Liz, who's a supporter of the podcast yesterday, and she was talking about how in the evening she wants to spend time doing kind of research and reading, and how she's finding it hard sometimes to focus on the reading and what she's learning, and how she's kind of made a connection between how much time she's spending on her phone and the evenings when she then goes to try to take things in and she can't do it. And she's wondering if there's a link between those two things. So that's kind of similar to what you're saying there. Yeah, definitely. Okay. You talked a little bit earlier, Andrew, about kind of going with your energy. Sometimes, you know, we get up and we feel great and we're like, bring it on, come in the kitchen, and we're doing as much. But other times we just think, oh, I haven't got it in me, I can't do this. And, you know, if our body's saying that to us, we should listen to it. We can rest. And if you do rest in those moments when your body's saying to you, I can't do this, even if your mind's going, no, but I need to do this, I need to do this. If you do rest, that attention to your body will pay you back. You will find you have more energy than you had, and you can come back. And then when when the wind gets you again and you've recovered, then go for it, You're a dynamo in the kitchen. So do go with your energy. Don't feel like every day should be the same and you should be able to do this, every single day at this time. Some days we can do a lot more than others. Mm-hmm. I would also say, don't forget to do the things you love. This whole thing about, keep the essentials as quick and efficient as possible, in my book, is so that I can spend more time in the kitchen doing the things that I love. And if I don't have that kind of pottering time in the kitchen, or the odd meal where I think, I just want to, let's see what I can make with this, or I really feel like I want to make some kind of special oatcake dish today. If I don't do that, I miss it so much, because following my creative whims in the kitchen is so much part of what feeds me. So don't forget to do the things you love. And then the last thing that I wanted to say was to be kind to yourself. I feel like there is never enough time to do the things we want to do, both in and out of the kitchen. But there is always enough time for it to be okay, for it to be okay. And being okay is important. It's far more important than losing it and being overwhelmed all the time because we feel like we haven't got enough time. So just be kind and gentle with yourself and understand that, frankly, what you're doing is enough, and you're not always going to be in the situation you are now. Things change. Mm-hmm. Okay, is there anything you'd like to add, Andrea, before we close?
Oh, that was beautiful, Alison. I loved it.
Thank you. Okay, well, we finally tackled this topic. Hopefully, listeners will get some benefit from it, and I will see you again next time.
All right, Alison.
Bye.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the podcast, you can join as a patron. Choose from various levels starting at $5. You can see what we offer at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com. While you're there, check out our favourite books, supplements and kitchenware, or give a one-time donation. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you know someone who would love our show, tell them about us. You are helping to bring ancestral food wisdom into modern kitchens, changing the world one plate at a time.